Okay, so yesterday we talked about the pump calculation, mainly relating with the energy equations and how to incorporate those pump duty into the energy equation. And then we also briefly talk about the net positive suction head, which is the calculation to ensure that the feed of the pump will still be in a liquid form without any vapor to prevent any cavitation. So just a quick review. Again, be aware with the position of the pump. If it's below if the pump below the source tank, that means the notation of the elevation has to be positive, because in this case it will help the liquid to go to the pump more easily without any causing vaporization. But for the case B, where the pump is located above the tank 1, that means the notation has to be accounted as negative Z. Okay, and it's likely to be riskier to form any vapor. Okay, so that's the NPSH, and okay, hold on. To be more specific, there are two terms of NPHS that is used in the industry. There is NPSH available, which is calculated using the formula, and the other terms is NPSH required, which is not calculated but completely provided by the supplier of the pump. Okay, so if we go back to the previous slide yesterday, usually we start with the ideal pump. Maybe we can say that it's an ideal case where we can ensure that no vaporization will happen if we make sure this part already above zero. Okay, so that's the delta between the suction pressure and the vapor pressure, plus minus the elevation of the tank versus the pump, minus the friction between the source to the suction part of the pump. So if we can assume that there is no pressure drop in the pump between the incoming nozzle into the impeller part of the pump, this formula is applicable. But in reality, usually a pump provider will provide the NPSH required, which is slightly above zero. Okay, which is slightly above zero. The NPSH required. This is to account if there is any additional pressure drop when the liquid enters the pump until it is sent at a higher pressure. Okay, so again, the available is calculated using the formula. The required is provided by the pump supplier. Okay, so once we combine those concepts, now we can conclude that for the general NPSH requirement. Okay, hold on. That's NPSH available. Again, that's plus minus as in the previous slide. But the required is determined by the manufacturer to compensate the additional pressure drop that may be occur during the when the liquid enters the pump. Okay, so we can imagine. You can imagine the two trends between NPSH available and the NPSH required as a function of volumetric flow rate. Okay, as a function of volumetric flow rate. That means it can be expressed as cubic meter per hour, for example. If we have a higher flow rate, so if we have a higher flow rate, how will it affect the NPSH available? And you can match with those formula. When the volumetric flow rate increase, there will be no effect to the elevation. It remains constant. And then how will it affect the For example, the vapor pressure, it will not affect the vapor pressure. If we're talking about the same fluid, if we're talking about the same water, the vapor pressure will remain the same. The suction pressure, that is likely to be slightly different. But the main difference would be in the head of the friction in the suction part. Okay, so friction in the suction part, that will increase when the volumetric flow rate increase. Why? It's very straightforward. When the volumetric flow rate increase, the linear velocity increase. The linear velocity increase, that means the pressure drop in the pipeline increase. That means it's gonna be riskier that the vapor will start to form. Okay, that's why the NPSH available will gradually decrease when the volumetric increase. On the other hand, the NPSH required tends to increase when the volumetric flow rate increase. Why? Again, when we have a higher amount of feed going into the pump, and the pump is not working ideally, there is a chance that the pressure drop will be higher than the initial condition. Okay, so if we extrapolate this trend, that's the intersection when cavitation starts. Okay, when NPSH NPSHA is equal to NPSH required. So that's the start of the cavitation, and of course above those line, that's unsafe operation range. Okay, that's unsafe operation range because it's not about, well, the vaporization will occur even higher at those points. So it's not a safe operation for the pump. So we can say that if we have this kind of trend, the safe operation for this pump would be that's the Vmax. Below that number, that will still be okay because we can ensure that no vaporization occur. Okay, and the question now, NPSH available can be provided, can be calculated using the previous formula, but where can we find the NPSH required? So this is the example that we discussed last week about a typical centrifugal performance curve. We just extract the informations last time to the primary axis to get the head generated by the pump and to get the efficiency of the pump. But we haven't talked about the secondary axis, which is actually the NPSH required. Okay, so that's why it's mentioned that the NPSH required would be stated by the vendor, by the supplier, because they are the only one that knows the internals of the pumps. Okay, so in this case, if we use 100 cubic meter per hour to the pump, and then we go into the secondary axis direction, that means the NPSH required would be approximately 3 meter. Okay, that means you have to make sure that the NPSH available has to be higher than 3 meter. Okay, to make sure that it is a safe operation. And the other, I think this is just empirical formula. If we really want to know about the sizing of the impeller, okay. Again, this is actually better explained in the mechanical engineering, much more detailed, but it's coming from empirical derivation. Okay, so this is not like an analytical formula. It's completely based on experiment. So this is you just have to accept it's empirical based on experiment. That the power of the pump, that's the power of the pump, will be proportional in the first order with the density, with the coefficient of the pump itself, and then with N is the RPM. That's the RPM, the rotation of the impeller. D, of course, is the diameter of the impeller. Okay. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, if there is no question, I will continue. And this is like a heuristic, and usually someone will say it says some rule of thumb, okay, which is gathered from a lot of handbooks or reference in chemical engineering. For example, this is coming from Turton. So if you, as you imagine that we need a lot of numbers, correction factor, efficiency, delta P. So a lot of those things will be limited by some practical constraints or practical considerations. So engineers often use terms like heuristic, rule of thumb, best practice. That means it's just a habit based on more than probably 100 years of operation of pump. How can we operate the pump efficiently, safely, and as expected? Okay, so this is just like a best practice, and you can see that power for pumping liquid, well, this is just an empirical equation, but I already explained to you that this is coming from the work is equal to VDP, and then if you want to take account the efficiency, that efficiency will be at the bottom. And then NPSH. Okay, so we just talk about NPSH. What would be the typical and the pump? It must be in excess of a certain number. Okay, what is the certain number? So that's the NPSH required that we just talked about previously. Okay, depending on the kind of pump and the condition, if damage is to be avoided. Okay, so common range, what would be the common range? Common range for the liquid would be 1.2 meter to 6.1 meter. Okay, so that would be the common NPSH for most of the typical pump. Is there any pump that require okay, let me check your understanding. If you have NPSH required for the same identical head generated, okay, let's say you have an option. You go to a pump shop, and then you're being offered that the pump A has the same performance, but the NPSH will be 2 meter, for example, and pump B with the same performance. The only difference is the NPSH. The NPSH required is 5 meter. The other performance, the other characteristic are exactly the same. Which one do you think is better? Which one do you think will be more expensive?
The 2 meters would be more expensive, right, sir?
The 2 meters should be more expensive. Why?
Because it can accept any type of fluids.
Well, they have a higher tolerance. So they have a higher tolerance, and they have less amount of pressure drop inside of the pump. So if we have a smaller number of NPSH required, so if NPSH is 2 meter, that means the NPSH available, if we have 2.5 meter, that works fine for the system without cavitation. So now if we have NPSH available of the system is only 2.5 meter, it's safe for us to use the pump A. Okay, but it's not safe for us to use the pump B. It's gonna be very risky to that vaporization will happen. Okay, so in a very sensitive case where we don't really have a lot of suction head, for example, of course we want to use pump with a very small NPSH required, but usually that's gonna cost more. Okay, but yeah, it's just an option. Okay. Okay, so that is like the typical specific speed of the impeller. And then the number 4 is the typical maximum head for one stage. So you can see that for a centrifugal single stage, the typical capacity would be between 0.06 to 19 cubic meter per minute. And the maximum head for one stage is about 150 meter. If we push those number to above 150 meter, it's likely to have a very small efficiency. Okay, now if we want to have a higher stage and if we want to have a higher head, that means we have to use the multi-stage, and the maximum head, as you can see, can increase very significantly, even like 10 times than the single stage pump. Okay, so how high this be? So for water, that's like you can increase the pressure of water from 1 bar to 168.5 bar. Okay, so that's super critical region, like really high pressure system. And you can see also the typical efficiency. Again, this is just a number. The actual number has to be provided by the pump curve itself, but at least you know the typical range. Okay, that's what's important. So if someone said to you that the pump efficiency would be like 95%, just say that it's impossible. Okay, it's very uncommon that pump has up to 95% of efficiency. So it's more likely to be in the 60, 70, 80 at most percent. Okay. And at the same time, if you're being offered that the pump efficiency is less than 30%, then it's not a good pump. Then it's not the correct type of pump for you. Find the other pump that will match your operation range better. Okay. So for axial pump, again, typical efficiency 65 to 85%, rotary pump 50 to 80%. Okay, so that seems normal. Okay, for the reciprocating 70%, 85%, 90% would be like the maximum. It's not common. Maybe it can be gathered, it can be provided, but it's not really common. So at least you know the range. Okay, what would be like the default efficiency for a pump? Okay, and then we will continue with the fan or blower, and this is actually very simple. I think we just have 2 slides for this one. Hold on. Okay, so fan or blower, again, this is to compress a gas only to small delta P. Okay. So you can check the reference or even Google it. What would be the maximum pressure of the blower? Okay, find what's the maximum pressure of a blower. The number would vary, but not very significantly. Probably it's gonna be in the range of about 2 ATM. Okay, some vendor would claim it's gonna be 1.8 ATM. Some other vendor will claim at 2 ATM. Maybe different vendor will provide different numbers, but more or less that's like the highest possible pressure of the blower will be at about 2 ATM. Maybe even more, the more common application of blower is even to a less amount of pressure ratio. So maybe only to 1.2 ATM, 1.3 ATM. That's like the typical operation of a blower. Above this number, then you have to go to the compressor. Okay, so the calculation for the blower is very simple. Still assumed to be non-compressible operation. Okay, even though we're working with a compressible fluid, but because of the small pressure ratio, it is assumed as a non-compressible operation. Okay, so that means the calculation is very similar to a pump, that it's coming from the integral of minus v dp, and because it's non-compressible, that means the volume is not a function of pressure. That means it simply can be calculated as v minus delta p. Okay, just the same with the pump. Okay, so I guess I don't have to talk too much about this part because this is very similar to the pump calculation. In terms of this efficiency, again, it's the same. The efficiency would be to accommodate the friction, the energy loss, the heat loss because of the compression part. And again, the blower efficiency depends on the gas volumetric flow rate. So there will be some efficiency curve, just as we can get those numbers from the centrifugal pump curve. Okay. In terms of the design, again, this is studied in more detail by mechanical engineer. So the selection of the blower fans, again, that's mainly depending on the physical properties of the gas itself, physical properties of the gas. For example, does it contain solid fraction or not, solid fraction, or even a dust. You can imagine that if we flow dirty air into a blower that contains a dust, that could like abrasive to the impeller of the blower. Okay, so the other part may be the corrosivity of the system. For example, if we use a blower to flow ambient air, that would be different with the blower for acid gas. Okay, acid gas is like CO2, H2S, any acid in vapor phase, that will be corrosive. That's why the material selection will be different. Okay, so it's for example, the design would be match with this kind of things. Viscosity is just like any other moving parts or rotational equipment. Okay, so this is how it looks. Straight blade or steel plate fan. Straight blade, so it's straight and it looks like a blade. Okay, and then curved blade. So the curve itself is curved. Again, chemical engineers doesn't study this type of thing very detailed, so we just need to be aware and to know this kind of types. Okay, but this is again the mechanical engineers part. Okay, any question before we go to the example of the pump calculation? So far so good?
So far it's okay, sir.
Okay, so I send you the reference for this exercise. Okay, it's coming from Darby. Hold on. It's coming from Darby example 8.1. Okay, and I think this is quite a good and comprehensive example to check your understanding for the pump. Okay, so we know that the requirement is to flow rate at 275 GPM. Okay, so because this is already given in the handbook, I will not calculate the number manually, so you can read from the book. But the important thing is we understand the step by step of the calculation. Okay, so that's the flow rate, volumetric flow rate. So you can express in V or even Q as a debit, for example. So GPM is gallon per minute. Okay, so use your conversion to convert this value For example, this is all expressed in British. Okay, so maybe you want to change it to cubic feet per second. That would be a good idea. Okay, because you want to express horsepower, you want to express watt, it has to be divided by second. And the length, the dimension of the pipeline usually is expressed as feet. Okay, so you can convert those number. Gallon itself, I guess it's very common for especially in the US to use this number. So one, yeah, you can Google it. I don't remember the number. Maybe it's kind of around 16 liter something, or 15 liter would be equivalent to 1 gallon. So both of the storage tank are atmospheric pressure. Okay. So in that case, we know that P1 is equal to P2 is equal to 1 atm. Okay. And then level in the downstream tank being 50 feet higher than the upstream tank. Okay, so if you have the downstream, okay, so that's like the case. Okay, and for example, delta H is 50 feet. Okay, and then the piping system contains 65 feet of 2-inch schedule 40 pipeline. Okay, so what is 2-inch? Is this the inside diameter, outside diameter, or nominal diameter? How? Yep, go ahead.
I think it's the nominal diameter.
Okay, so yep, correct. That's the schedule number of 50 and 2-inch. So that's the nominal diameter is 2-inch, and it's 40 schedule number. Okay, SN schedule number. So that's not the inside diameter, that's not the outside diameter. Whereas you will need to find the inside diameter for the calculation. So use those information, go to the table, then calculate or find the inside diameter. Okay, find the inside diameter. Because for the Reynolds, for the linear velocity, what you actually need is the inside diameter. Okay, and then you can see that there is one straight pipeline, 65 feet, one globe valve. Okay, so let me add the valve, one globe valve, and then 6 elbow. Okay, just add 4 another elbows. So that's the fitting. Okay, that will have to be calculated for the pressure drop calculation. And then the question would be, if the pump to be used has the characteristics shown in figure 8.2, the pump curve, what is the diameter impeller should be used with this pump, and what's the motor horsepower would be required. Okay, and then this is all the physical properties for the water. Okay, that's the density, that's the viscosity, and all the formula that will be needed to finish the calculation is provided in this slide. Okay, so I just add this part. Again, this is coming from Darby chapter 8. The pages I sent it to you 2 days ago, I think, page 200 something. Why? You just need to follow the data provided. Okay, so in this case, the fitting is provided as K1, Ki, and Kd. Okay, and based on Darby reference, based on Darby version, the actual overall fitting of the elbow and globe valve has to be calculated first based on a function of K1, Ki, and Kd. Okay, so you can use that number, you can use that number, and that's the number, and that's the diameter itself. Okay, and calculate the Reynolds. I think that's very straightforward. Once you get the KF, you can convert those KF into the other parts of the calculation. Okay, so that's not KL, that's KF. That's KF. Okay, so you just have to combine all the pressure, all the friction part as a total pressure drop. Okay. Okay, so anyone has an idea what will be the first step if you get this kind of calculation?
Find the Reynolds number, sir.
Okay, you can find a Reynolds number. Find RE, but the thing is, to get RE, you need to get rho will D in per mu. Okay, but the thing is, this number has not been completely provided. So rho is provided, and U, the linear velocity, has not been provided. So actually, you have to calculate the diameter inside and U first. Okay, the meter per second or feet per second. Okay, so again, it's really up to you if you want to convert everything to SI or still working in a British unit. It's really up to you. In this case, you want to work in British, that's fine. Convert the GPM, as I stated before. Convert the GPM to cubic feet per second. So once you know it's X cubic feet per second, then you just have to divide by the square feet. The square feet is coming from the area of the pipeline. Area of the pipeline will be diameter in square per 4, right? So once you get the inside diameter, you calculate the area of the pipeline, then you can calculate the feet per second of the stream. Okay, after Reynolds, what will be the next step?
Finding the KF.
Okay, so the next step will be to calculate the total friction, right? And the friction, you calculate the K, you calculate the KF, you need to calculate the friction factor as a function of Reynolds, the Moody chart, the Fanning chart, because before you go into the energy equation, you have to finish the energy friction calculation first. Okay, and as you can see, you need to know the length, it's provided, diameter is provided, friction factor, that's not provided, has to be calculated after you get the Reynolds. It's already calculated, the feet per second or the meter per second. And then afterwards, you can sum up everything for the friction part. So that's like expressing the K for the pipe plus the K for the elbow plus the K for the valve. Okay, as we have 6 elbow, then you will multiply by 6 for the elbow. Okay, so that's the overall friction. Okay, the overall friction, you calculate that. You can convert easily. So if you calculate the straight pipeline using this correlation, the 4 times F times L per D, that would be equivalent to K of the pipeline. Okay, so that's would be equivalent to K of the pipeline. Where you can directly substitute the number, the length, that's the 65 feet provided in the example, That's the inside diameter that has to be calculated based on 2 inch and schedule number 40. That is coming from the chart. Okay.
Pak Anggit, I have a question, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the elbow, how do you calculate the length, sir?
Well, no, you don't need it. Okay.
It's using the Darby equation, right, sir?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I understand, sir.
So for the elbow, you get the number from the K directly for the fitting. Okay. The only 4 times FL per D that you need is the straight pipeline. But be careful. Sometimes the problem will be expressed in different way, and it's very common the elbow and the valve expressed as L per D equivalent. Again, in the chapter 7 of Darby and in the previous slide from Pak Wawan, the table for this L per D equivalent should be provided. Okay, it's the same concept. It's called equivalent. That means every time you see one elbow, it's gonna be equivalent to a certain L per D. And if the example is provided in this input L per D equivalent, then don't use this formula. Don't use the KF formula. What you need to do is to use this formula, the L per D part. Okay. So now what you have is the sigma of L per D of pipe plus L per D of elbow plus L per D of the valve. It should give you more or less the same results. If there is a difference, it's just because of the decimal. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
So far, so good, sir.
Okay. Okay. So I'll put it this way. So or sigma L per D. That's the same thing. Okay. Be flexible on the input that is provided by the questions. Okay. And then afterwards, you calculate the EF. You calculate the EF using, could be this correlation if it's provided as L per D, or could be the, hold on, which part? This. So either equation A or equation B. Okay. If you calculate everything in L per D, that means you use the calculation A. If you calculate everything in K, that means you use the B part, because the delta P per row is calculated as KF times U square per 2. Okay. Afterwards, you go to the equation of energy equation. Go to the energy calculation to calculate ideal work. Calculate ideal pump work. As you can see, this is the energy equation. So apart from the friction, everything is straightforward. Okay. Most of the time you will use your time to calculate the friction. For the elevation, straightforward. You have the delta Z as well. Hold on. Initially, what you have is Z1, so that become minus Z2. So that means I will have to account the information is 50 feet, right? Yep. So that's positive. Delta P, you don't have it at this case because the delta P is 0. because both of the tank is atmospheric pressure. 1 minus 1, right? 1 minus 1, 0. Delta velocity, I don't think you have it because everything is into inch, right? Everything is flowed into inch. That means there is no change in the diameter. That means there is no change in the velocity of the water in the pipeline. Okay, so that's 0 because V1 is equal to V2 because P1 is equal to P2. Okay, so from this number, then you get the, if you want to put the plus EF, that's fine. Plus EF will be equal to ideal work of the pump. Okay, ideal work of the pump. And then afterwards, you go to the curve, go to the pump curve. Then find the efficiency, find the head, find the efficiency and head. Okay, and then choose the impeller. Okay, what's wrong? Choose impeller. Okay, and then again horsepower, that's the watt, right? That's the power. So work of the pump, that means later you will have to calculate the ideal versus divided by the efficiency, and the efficiency is gathered from the pump curve. Okay, this is the pump curve that we use. So it's already provided the flow rate that we're evaluating, the 275 GPM. Okay, I'll go back to this curve later. In terms of the number, you can match it. Okay, so the delta Z is 50 feet, the delta P is 0, the delta V is 0, the Reynolds number at 275 GPM is this number. You can match that coming from the rho UD in per mu. Friction factor. So again, I hope you already understand how to get this number from the fanning chart. Okay, remember those type of chart, straight line in the laminar, and then you have a lot of different in the turbulent part. So that's the laminar part, that's the turbulent part. So that's a function of RE, that's a function of F, I think. So just match, once you get the Reynolds number, okay, we're working in the turbulent zone. That means you need to find the epsilon per diameter, the roughness of the pipeline. Okay, epsilon per diameter, that's the number. So you find the epsilon per D that match your case, and then you just drag the number, then that's your F. In this case, the F is 0.00497. And for the K itself, you can calculate it. Okay, the globe and the elbow, again, this is coming from this Darby equation, K1 per NRE plus Ki. Okay, let me write it. K1 per NRE. Oops. Plus Ki. So that's the formula for the fitting as given by Darby, but for the pipeline, then it is calculated as the equivalent for FL per D. Okay, for FL per D as explained over here. Kf is for FL per D. For FL per D. Again, the F now is already provided, already calculated, 0.00497. The length is 65 feet. The diameter is close to 2 inch. Okay, and then afterwards you can calculate the total friction. Okay, calculate the total friction. EF. It's really up to you. You want to calculate in joule per kilogram first, or in directed to, well, not joule per kilogram, probably in British term, because everything is expressed in British. But if you want to calculate in head, that means you directly calculate in feet. So it's directly calculated in HP, this is in feet. So make sure that everything is divided by rho g, right? And you can see that's all directly delta Z. The unit must be already in feet. So it's already consistent with the head calculated by feet. So again, this is just the simplification of the friction part. Usually, oops, sorry. Usually you have something like for FL per D U square per 2. I think that's usually the formula, right? So by substituting the for FL per D as K, then you can calculate the friction. Okay, so from this one you need to be aware that U is equal to Q per A, and Q per A would be like Q per 5D square per 4. Okay. So that's why once you simplify everything, you get this simplified 8Q square per G V square sigma of KF per D. The 8 part coming from the area divided by 2 and so on. Okay. Any questions up until this point?
Sir, I have one question, sir.
Okay.
It's regarding the one that you gave the textbook thing, sir. Because there is like 3K, there is 2K, and there's the crane method. What's the difference between all three, sir?
The K itself, you mean?
Yeah, the K, sir. Like,
Well, it's all.
what? Why is it in the textbook, sir? I don't get their explanation, sir.
Okay, so well, it's an empirical model. Okay, so that's first of all, it doesn't really have a lot of physical definition. Okay, so it's just equivalent. So K is like equivalent of equivalent. What would they say? L per D, or the restriction in the fitting. Okay. So it comes from those definition first. It's an equivalent of a straight pipeline, because we want to use one equation for all type of pipeline system. For the straight pipeline, it's straightforward. It can be derived from the Darcy equation. It can be derived from the momentum balance, and then finally it can be proved that for a straight pipeline, EF is what we use as 4L per D FU square per 2. That can be derived analytically for a straight pipeline, but that's very hard to do for fitting. How can you derive equation for elbow, and then you have to derive equation for T? and then you have to derive another equation for valve or any other equation for other fitting. It's just too much to do, you know. So we try to convert everything into the equivalent straight pipeline. So that's the concept. Now the question is, if I have 1 unit of elbow, okay, so that's one pipeline, 65 feet, right? Now I have 1 elbow, so that's elbow 90 degree. Okay, if I have elbow 90 degree with the standardized dimension that is used in the industry, what would be the equivalent pressure drop? And we convert it to a equivalent straight pipeline. That's what K means, to convert all type of fitting to equivalent of the pipeline. But the thing about the formula in Darby, okay, so now why is Darby using this 3K instead of 1K or 2K that is reported by a lot of other reference? So the important part is actually the correction part over here. Okay, so you see, this tells you that if you have elbow of 2 inch and you have elbow of 20-inch pipeline, it's gonna results in different equivalent of straight pressure drop. The angle will be 90 degree, but the friction will be different. That will cause a different pressure drop equivalent. That's why Darby offers the 3 correction factor to accommodate all different possible dimensions and types of fitting. So if you use so again, I think it's provided in the chapter 7, that the book I give to you 2 days ago. Before the 3D model, 3K model, there are like the 1K model and 2K model, but they just assumes all types of fitting will not be affected by the dimension itself. So elbow 2 inch will have the same equivalent with the elbow of 12 inch, with equivalent with the same number for elbow of 20 inch. But based on their experiment, based on their measurement, that's not the case. Okay, so that's why they offer the more complex and complete fitting requirement. So how can they generate the pressure drop itself? It's based on experiment again. So you just flow 1 cubic meter per second water into 1 elbow, check the pressure in the upstream, check the pressure in the downstream. What will be the pressure drop? Okay, that's the pressure drop. That means I can calculate my equivalent L per D. Okay. Okay, I think that's my answer. Hopefully that answered the questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, now we go back again to the example. So at the end of the friction calculation, now we get that the head of the pump, okay, the head of the pump is 219 feet. That already covers the delta H, and that already covers the friction. They don't cover the pressure and the velocity because it doesn't require any increase in pressure and velocity. Okay. But now here comes the other restriction from the performance of the pump itself. Because again, this is not a customized pump. We just buy what is the closest one available in the market. So once we match those number at 275, that's 275. Hold on. 219, sorry. 219 feet head generated by the pump. That's the required HP, right? And you see the intersection. Okay, what is the bold line? Can anyone guess what's the bold black line?
Is it the operational curve, sir?
Okay, that's the operational curve, right? That we talked a couple days ago. Operational pipeline curve. And the actual condition, uncontrolled, to get to 219 feet at 275 GPM, you will be in this intersection, right? And that is between the 7¼ and 7¾ impeller diameter. Okay, and that's like asking the supplier, okay, I really want a customized diameter impeller, but that's not possible. Okay, so our ideal uncontrolled natural flow requirement would require impeller between 7¼ and 7¾ inch diameter. Maybe if they produce the impeller at 7½ inch, that will better match our requirement. But that's not really the case in this available pump in the market. Okay, and of course you have to round up. Of course you have to round up. There is no way that you round down the impeller diameter. That means now you select 7¾ inch impeller. Okay, but the problem, if it's not controlled, if it's not choked, that means you will have a higher head generated. Why? Now, sorry. So now this is your pump curve at the selected impeller diameter. That's your selected impeller. So what you get is now you will actually flow a higher amount of flow rate, because that's the intersection between the operational pipeline curve and the selected impeller curve. And even it fails onto occasion. Okay, it fails onto occasion. You don't get V is not equal to 275 GPM, and the head is not 219 GPM. Sorry, feet. So, but at least for the first question, it's already answered. You have to select the 7¾ inch impeller diameter, but with extra modification. What's the modification? You install valve or choke. You choke the opening to make sure that you get 275 GPM at 200 at 7¾ inch diameter. Okay, so we'll have to erase my note over here to better explain the next one. So you still want to work at 275 GPM. That's still your target, right? That's still your required flow rate. And at the same point, you're being forced to use the 7¾ impeller diameter. So find the intersection. So now this is the new intersection. Okay. So that's the new intersection. at 275 GPM, which is your required flow rate, and 7¾ inch impeller. What's the consequence? The consequence now is instead of producing 219 feet, your actual generated head is around 250 feet. Because you really want to work at 275 GPM. Okay, but you are forced to round up the impeller. So now you generate those 250. Whereas the ideal pressure drop itself only require 219 feet. So the difference, the delta between 250 minus 219, which is roughly 31 feet, that's the loss or dissipated in the valve. And if we want to make an imaginary new operational pipeline curve, as I explained previously, you can do that. So it's like we are making a new operational curve, at choke or control condition. So now the intersection really match the operational curve. Okay, I think it's the same explanation. The dissipation of about 30 feet because you still generate 250 feet from the pump itself. Okay, any questions? Any questions?
It's okay, sir.
It's okay. Okay, so that's one option. And the book itself also stated that in this case, the system becomes more complex. Okay, so option one. So option one, you install a valve to choke the feed. Okay, that's option one, as explained in the case. But actually, there are option two. If you want to explore the other part of the pump, okay, which is to install VSD, variable speed drive. Some of type of pump will be you have an option. It's optional to install a variable speed drive. Okay. For a variable speed drive, you can see that at this particular pump, it works at 3500 RPM. Okay. So what will happen if you have an VSD? Maybe you have option to reduce to 34,000, for example. What would happen if you have the flexibility to operate the impeller at a slower rotation per minute? How will it shift the performance curve? Option one, it will not shift the performance curve of the pump. It will shift the operational pipeline curve, right? From the black line, now we shift to the blue line. We shift to the blue line, but that increase the loss, the dissipation. We still require high energy consumption. The option two, we don't shift the pipeline curve. What we shift is the pump curve itself. Okay, so maybe what will happen at this lower RPM is instead of the green line, the 7¾ pump curve line, now I can directly work at the purple line. Okay, so the purple line is the 7¾ inch at 3400 RPM. So the idea is find the RPM that match the head required. So instead of producing 250 feet, now you reduce the speed to directly generate 219 feet as the required by the system. Okay, is that clear? Any question?
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yep.
Why is it that the loss or dissipated pressure bed for the pump, sir?
So, what do you mean?
That
Why?
one, sir, the 31 feet. Why is it bad, sir? Why do we have to adjust it like so that it's exactly at the point, you know?
Well, it's not 100% efficient. It serves the purpose, it serves the objective of the process, but you spend more than what is ideally required. Okay. Okay, maybe I can answer that question by answering the second question. What motor horsepower would be required? Okay. I think those questions can be answered using the same principle. Okay, so the next question is to calculate the horsepower, right? Horsepower or power, again, it must comes from the feet multiplied by the delta P, one way or the other. Okay, so it must comes from the V times delta P per efficiency for a pump. Okay, and then if you have expressed in debit, the other part is just to get into this same concept, or at least just look at this number, rho GH. That's gonna be equivalent to delta P, right? Rho GH is already a pressure, so that corresponds to the delta P part. Q corresponds to the volumetric feed parts. So that's the same thing. Okay. What will be the number of the electricity required if you choose the option 1? You choke the feed, you leave the pump as it is. So you can put the number. So what will be the rho? Rho is 62.36. So it's 62.36 times, what's G in British unit? 32.2, if I'm not mistaken. Head of the pump. Okay, so that's the keyword over here. What will be the number that you have to put as the HP? Not the horsepower, but the head of the pump. In option 1, do you put 250 or 219?
Option 1 is when you choke it, right, sir?
Yes.
So it's the 219, is it?
For option 1, for the choke part, you have to put the 250 because the pump itself is still generating 250 head generated.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, times the Q per efficiency is 4.7. Okay, that's the option 1. Now, if you have the option 2, you install the VSD, you lower the RPM, the density is still the same, gravity constant is still the same. Instead of 250, now you produce exactly 219 feet because of the lower speed rotation, right? And you will save electricity. You will save operating costs. Instead of multiplying by 250, now you multiply by 220, 219. That's like saving 30 out of 250, maybe like 15% saving, 15% electricity saving. And that can be justified. You install the VSD that costs extra money, of course, but during 20-year operation of the pump for a chemical plant, you save 50% of those 20-year operation. It's really a no-brainer actually. If you have option to install the VSD, then buy the VSD one. But not all the pump can be supported by VSD. Okay. Again, if we talk about well water in our home, I'm not sure that there is an option to install a VSD. It's not worth it. Okay. We just use it 15 minutes out of one day, and then we install VSD. Okay, it's not worth it.
Sir, so horsepower is actually the actual work that you put out, right? Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah, right. Okay.
Yes, the energy consumed. So it's the actual. Okay, so the actual or gross or so it's not the one that is only used to increase the fluid, but that is provided by the external sources. That's why it's already multiplied by the efficiency. Okay, any questions? Okay, if that's it, then I think this is the end of this slide, the pump and blower, and we still have like around 30 minutes at most to have introduction for the compressor. Okay. Okay, so can you see the new slide, the compressor part?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, so before we start, I just remember one thing. Our regular class is Thursday and Tuesday, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yep. That means for next week we don't have the Thursday class because it's holiday. Okay, so next week we only have the one class, 1 hour session in Tuesday. So for the compressor itself, probably I will think at least we need 3 hours. So today it's just the introduction of the type of compressor, and then next Tuesday we will use the time to learn the calculation of the compressor work, but then at least we need another 1 hour to practice, just like we did earlier for the pump. Okay, so just to give you a heads up about the schedule for about next 2 weeks, and maybe in next 3 or 4 weeks there will be the second module exam. Of course, we will have to check with Pak Wawan with the schedule for the regular class. Okay, so at least for today, we need to use the time to understand the type and the principle of a compressor. a lot of similar things with the pump, only a slightly more complex. Okay, in terms of the function, it's very clear. Compressor will be used to increase the gas pressure. Maybe that's the most important one. Pressure increase. Pressure will increase. And then at the same time, the volume will decrease because it's compressible. Okay. Okay, what happens? Okay. And usually, I think I already explained to you last week about this. Because of the compressibility of the gas, your temperature will increase. And that consumes work. Okay, that consumes work or energy. In terms of the type, it's very similar to a pump. You have the centrifugal family, and you have the axial family, and then you have the PD family, the positive displacement family. So in terms of the illustration of how it works, it's very similar to the classification of a pump. Okay, so again, in terms of the performance, a lot of similarities. You have a compressor centrifugal curve, just as in the pump, but you don't have it in the positive displacement. You can use the PD compressor for high pressure ratio. Okay, okay. So let me emphasize one thing: pump versus compressor. Okay, let me emphasize one thing: for a pump versus compressor, the important thing for a pump is the delta P. You know the delta P. Delta P means discharge pressure minus suction pressure. Okay, that's different with compressor. You don't ask people about the delta P of the compressor. It's misleading. What important in the compressor is the compression ratio or pressure ratio. Okay, or pressure ratio. Compression ratio or pressure ratio. That is the important part of compressor. The delta P of a compressor is not really meaningful. Okay. Ratio, that means we're talking about discharge pressure per suction pressure. Why? You will understand when we go into the formula. Okay. Because in the formula of the work calculation, work is calculated as a function of delta P, but for a compressor, it's calculated as a function of P per P. As I hope you already understand in thermodynamics. When we're talking about our adiabatic compression, polytropic compression, it's never about the delta P, it's about the P per P. Okay. And this is really important. Once we want to make sure the performance is efficient. Okay. Let me go back later about those explanation. Okay, but at least now please be aware in the compressor the important part is the pressure ratio. So for the positive displacement compressor, you can achieve a very high pressure ratio, even where more than 10, it's possible. For a centrifugal, that's not possible. That's just very inefficient. Okay. So for a centrifugal, the number could be arbitrary for centrifugal compressor, the compressor ratio would be between 1 to 3 or even probably 1 to 4. So it's like saying the maximum pressure ratio for a centrifugal compressor would be at around 4. It's very uncommon centrifugal ratio has compression ratio higher than 4. Why? Because it's efficient. The temperature will increase uncontrollably and you need a lot of electricity. So for a centrifugal compressor, if you need from 1 bar, it's ratio, right? So if you choose 3 compression ratio, now you get 3 bar. 3 per 1 is equal to 1. And then you will have to cool it because it's already very hot. And then you go to the second compressor. And then you cool it again and so on. Okay. So from 3 bar, now you get 9 bar. So if you need 27, you go to another stage. You go to 81, you go to another stage and so on. So there are a lot of different components. Now you have intercooler, for example, which is a heat exchanger to cool down the process. Why? Because the temperature increase. You don't have it in a pump. In a pump, it doesn't matter. You can go straight because if it's 30 degrees C, it's still gonna be around 30 degrees C over here. It's still gonna be around 30 degrees C over here. It's still gonna be around 30 degrees C over here. For a compressor, that's not the case. You have 30 degrees C, you compress to 3 bar, it's likely to be above 100 degrees C. And at high temperature, it's inefficient to use a compressor. So you cool it down back to 30 degrees C, and then you get another hot temperature over here, over and over again. And if you push the centrifugal compressor to work at a very high compression ratio, instead of 3, now you push 1 bar directly to 10 bar, what's going to happen is your temperature will be probably even higher than 300 degrees C. That's too hot, too costly, and too hard to handle. Okay, so one big difference between pump and compressor is again the compressibility that really affects the temperature profile of a compressor. In terms of the type, it's very similar. Centrifugal, that means you go take advantage of the rotation of the impeller. Because of the impeller rotation, the kinetic energy of the gas increase. Okay, so this is the component. How does a centrifugal compressor work? So that's the inlet coming from the bottom and then send to this direction, and then there will be rotation. That's the impeller, first stage impeller. Okay, so there will be some rotation, increase the kinetic energy of the fluid, and then you have a diffuser. Okay, diffuser is to convert kinetic energy to pressure. Okay, so again, you increase the kinetic by the rotation of impeller, and then you convert to pressure using the diffuser. Okay, and then step 2 and 5 are repeated until the required discharge pressure is achieved. Okay. Even as I explained previously, it's very common to have intercooler and then send to the next stage of compressor. Duplicate this picture. So going into next step of compressor. So again, the important one that you have to be aware is the inlet, and then the impeller where it rotates, and then the diffuser to convert from high velocity, high kinetic energy to pressure. So that's the intercooler. Okay, again, same thing, compressor curve. Inlet volume flow, you get a head, you get different efficiency. Okay, very similar to a pump. Some things that have to be emphasized. Do you know the difference between actual volumetric flow versus normal or standard volumetric flow? What's the difference? Okay, again, this is very important. And which one should be used in this condition? Anyone has an idea? What's the difference between actual and normal or standard? Has this been explained previously?
I have never heard of it, sir. I'm confused.
Really? Okay. Okay, so please paying attention. This is really, really important. Okay, it's a big difference. Okay, if it's state at actual, that means it's stated at operating PNT. What does that mean? If we're working at 20 bar and 100 degrees C, then state the volumetric flow rate as cubic meter per second or CFM at those PNT. But if it's normal or standard volumetric flow, it's stated at different, it is stated at reference PNT. Okay, so it is stated at difference PNT. For a normal, you can Google it if you don't believe me. Okay, for a normal PNT, it is stated at 20 degrees C and 1 ATM. For a standard, there is a different standard. So there is a thing called ASTP or STP, probably you heard it in basic chemistry, I think. STP is like 25 degrees C or and 1 ATM, right? Room temperature. What else? Some now STP in the US. Okay, STP in the US sometimes expressed in different reference point. STP in the US or imperial system or imperial, it is stated in different system. It is stated at 60 degree F, which is around 15 degrees C, and 1 ATM. And this is really important. Why? It goes back to the gas equation. We're talking about volume, right? We're talking about volume. So volume is equal to ZRT per P. So that's the difference between actual volumetric flow rate and normal or standard volumetric flow rate. So if stated as normal or standard, then V can be calculated using this one. Okay, put the T must be 25 degrees C at room temperature, must be 60 degree F at STP and the US, must be 20 degrees C in the normal condition. P itself is always 1 ATM. But it's gonna be very different if you express in actual volumetric flow rate. Why? Just imagine you have gas at 20 ATM and 200 degrees C. Okay, it's a hot pressurized gas. The volume will be very different. This is no issue for a liquid because liquid is non-compressible. It doesn't matter the temperature and the pressure, the volume remains relatively constant. But for a gas, it's completely change the number. Okay, and it can be expressed in both terms depending on the needs. If you want to express in actual volumetric flow rate, that means once you use the V equal to ZRT, then Z times R times the temperature has to be directly the 200 degrees C. That means 473 Kelvin per temperature is 280 M, so that's 280 M, right? That's V actual. At the same times, this stream can be expressed as volumetric flow rate in standard condition. That means you still calculate as Z, R, but the temperature now, instead of 473 Kelvin, you use the standard STP, 298 Kelvin. Per the pressure, you don't use the actual pressure, but you use the standard pressure, the 1 atm. And as you can see in terms of the number changed a lot. Instead of dividing by 200, now you divide it by 1. The volume will be like 200 times smaller in the actual condition, but if you express in standard condition, it becomes 200 times bigger than the actual volume. Both has purpose. Okay. For some transactional business purpose, people just become too confused when they use actual volumetric basis. Why? Because let's say you wanna sell a gas, okay, from Indonesia. Maybe the nowadays we sell gas from Tangguh, from Papua, and from Bontang probably. You sell gas from Bontang to Japan, to South Korea. Okay, you said, okay, I want to sell 1 million cubic meter per day, for example. The problem is the cubic meter is changed when it's to 20 atm, and it changed when it's 1 atm. And then you get a dispute, and then you fight to the court. Okay, you claim to me that you sell 1 million cubic meter, but at South Korea we just receive 100 times lower than that because the pressure changed. So we don't want that to happen. That confuse a lot of people. So in a lot of transactional business, we always state as standard condition. Okay, we sell the gas at $5 per standard condition. So a lot of practical purpose. But in terms of the performance of the compressor, this is actually actual volumetric flow. Okay, that's why it's called CFM. CFM is cubic feet per minute. It's not expressed as standard CFM. Sometimes it's gonna be called as standard CFM. If you find something like this, X standard CFM, that means it's expressed as standard volumetric flow rate. Any questions? Again, this is very important. It will be used in a lot of different calculation and even in other courses and even in industry. So I hope you really understand the difference between actual gas volumetric flow rate versus normal or standard volumetric flow rate. Okay, maybe you can find Google if you want. BP Tangguh, okay, that's like the one of the biggest gas producer in Indonesia at the moment at Papua. Maybe they will say that they produce 1500 mm SCFD. MMSCFD. That's the word that is being used in industry. That means 1500 mm means million, S means standard, CFD means feet cubic per day. Okay, standard. That means it's stated at 60 degree F and 180 M. So the conversion always be the same at regardless of the pressure, regardless of the temperature. Okay, so yep. Any questions?
So far, it's all good, sir.
Okay, so the important thing here is you know that you have to use the actual inlet volume flow rate. Okay, the rest will be very similar to a centrifugal pump curve. The difference would be there is a very specific two terms used to limit the range of the operation of compressor. Okay. So at the left part, you have a surge limit. And at the right part, you have a stone wall limit. So actually, for this kind of compressor, your safe operating limit would be around this point. You don't want to cross the surge limit. If you cross the surge limit, the head will decrease very, very significantly. And it will also reach the compressor because you flow too small of flow rate into the compressor, and the compressor still keeps rotating at the same speed, and it will accumulate heat and could overheat the compressor. Okay, and for a stone wall, that means your flow rate is too high. That means the compressor at this point will not be able to generate any meaningful head, will not be able to generate any meaningful pressure. Okay, so in practice, you centrifugal more flexible than PD compressor, right? But it still has limit. The limit would be at the left to the surge, to the right is the stone wall. Okay, selection again, just like in a pump, you go to a brochure, you go to a compressor supplier, find the correct type, find the correct series. Based on your requirement, you calculate that you need certain pressure drop, you need certain head, you know the flow rate, you know the head, then just find the intersection. Okay, for this brand, I'll go with this series and so on. Axial compressor, it's quite similar to centrifugal. The only difference is the direction of the flow. Okay, the only difference is the direction of the flow. The direction of the flow over here is something like that. So it doesn't. So the difference with the centrifugal, for the centrifugal, it goes to the center, and then it rotates, right? It follows to rotates for a centrifugal compressor. Because of the rotation of the impeller. So it follows the direction of the impeller. But for the axial compressor, no. Axis. Axial compressor means the direction is adjacent to the axis of the compressor. Even though the compressor rotates this way, but it doesn't affect the direction of the pump, of the gas. Rotary compressor, similar to a rotary pump. You have to gear, you have to lobe, and it rotates. And because of the rotation of the gear, it increases the kinetic energy of the gas. Reciprocating, again, very similar to a reciprocating pump. It suck, it push, suck and push. Going leftward, rightward, so opposite direction. Okay, so for example, so that's the inlet. When it going to the left direction, it will suck the fluid. Okay, sorry for the stylus, I have really trouble today. So you just imagine when this shaft going to the left direction, it goes to the left direction, it will suck the air inside of the chamber because the volume increase. And then when the shaft goes to the right direction, the volume decrease and it push the air at a higher pressure. Okay, similar to a piston. Compressor curve, again, you have a centrifugal curve, but you don't have a PD compressor curve. Almost like a straight line. Not flexible at all. Very similar to PD pump. Similar to PD pump. Okay, what next? Performance curve, operational curve. Again, this is same thing. You already learned about this in the pump. Find the intersection. When you get the intersection between the performance curve and the operational curve, that is your actual flow rate and pressure generated. There is a VSD. Okay, as you can see, normal speed, trip speed, design speed. Very common centrifugal compressor to have VSD. To play around with the RPM, to play around with the head. Supplied by VSD. Gain the intersection, that's your given flow rate and the given head generated. Very similar to a pump. And this is the summary. I think it will almost sum up the content for today. This is the summary. I think this is coming from GPSA, if I'm not mistaken. Gas Processing Supplier Association. So what type of compressor would fit your purpose? What is the advantage of centrifugal? Good compression ratio, good capacity regulation, high range of capacity, flexible, low efficiency at low flow, and anti-surge protection is required. Surging, as we talk about surging, to protect the compressor at the low flow rate condition. Reciprocating, wide range of compression ratio, very high CR, okay, very high CR. Above the centrifugal compressor, but heavy condition because unbalanced force, because of the vibration or pulsation. So it's harder to be maintained compared to a centrifugal compressor. High efficiency, maintenance intensive. Okay, it's less reliable than the centrifugal one. And for the others, I guess you just have to read this table, okay, to get the summary between the centrifugal versus the positive displacement. Okay, I think that's it for today. Next Tuesday, we will start from slide 18, okay. Just a heads up, it is very similar to your Module 1 thermodynamic exam. Adiabatic compression, polytropic compressor, even the formula looks very similar, okay? But be careful. I just give one setup for you to check with the formula in the Smith-Vanes, for example, or in Pak Sanggono or Pak Hardev notes, okay? Be careful, okay? Be careful. It looks similar, but not completely the same. Be careful, open versus closed system. Be really careful. Okay, compressor, we are talking about open system. So the formula similar to, but not exactly the same with a closed system such as piston. Okay, so if you read Smith-Van Ness in chapter 2 or chapter 3, you want to match my formula in my slide with the Smith-Van Ness, you may notice some difference. The difference because one is talking about open system, one is talking about the closed system. Okay, the biggest difference, the only difference and the biggest difference is the gamma or the K. Okay, so you can before the class in Tuesday, you can check in the Smith-Van Ness for a closed system such as a piston. Usually the work will be expressed as 1 per gamma minus 1, P1 V1, P2 per P1, gamma minus 1 per gamma minus 1. So that's the difference. 1 is multiplied by gamma, 1 is multiplied directly by 1. This is for closed system, but for open system, we have to multiply by gamma. Okay, check that. And hopefully by Tuesday, we can finish this calculation parts. Again, this is why I talk to you, very important to understand the concept about pressure ratio. It's a function of pressure ratio. It's not a function of delta P. So if the pressure ratio becomes too high, above 5 for centrifugal, the increase of temperature will become too high. We will prove that in Tuesday. Okay, any questions? Last chance before we conclude the meeting.
All good, sir.
Okay, I think that's it. So we'll see you on Tuesday, okay?
Thank you very much, Pak Anggit.
Thank you, Pak Anggit.
Thank you, Pak Anggit.
Thank you, sir.